My brother walked into that conference room like he owned the building, which, technically, he was about to argue that he did. He was wearing a new suit, charcoal gray, tailored, the kind you buy when you're confident you're about to win something. My sister-in-law sat beside him, one hand on his arm, the other wrapped around a coffee cup from the expensive place downstairs. My parents were already seated at the far end of the table, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she hadn't needed yet, my father with his hands folded like he was chairing a board meeting. I was the last one in. I sat down across from my brother. I'll call him what he called himself in every family argument we'd ever had, the one who kept this family together. His name is Dominic, and he has believed since roughly age 14 that the world owed him something large. The estate attorney, a woman named Ms. Rowley's, Fitch, who looked like she had seen every version of this particular meeting before and found none of them surprising, set a stack of folders on the table and asked if everyone was present. My brother said yes before I could answer. I set my phone face down on the table, folded my hands, and waited. I should back up. My grandmother, we called her Gran, passed away 11 weeks before that meeting. She was 81. She had lived alone in the house she and my grandfather built in 1974 in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, in a neighborhood where the trees were old enough to touch over the street. She grew tomatoes every summer. She made biscuits from scratch every Sunday, even when her hands hurt. She kept a small dry erase board on her refrigerator that said, "What are you grateful for today?" And she changed her own answer every single morning. She was, without question, the most grounded person I have ever known. She was also, as it turned out, the most quietly strategic. My name is Brooke. I'm 31. For the past 4 years, I lived 20 minutes from Gran's house. I drove her to her cardiologist appointments. I helped her switch her banking online when her old brick-and-mortar branch closed. I sat with her on her back porch in the evenings when the weather was good, and I listened when she talked about my grandfather, about the years when money was tight, about the choices she had made and the ones she wished she had made temporarily. Dominic lives in Phoenix. He moved there 12 years ago for a job opportunity that worked out fine, and he built a life there, and that is not a crime. But in 12 years, he came back to Columbus for Christmas 4 times. He called Gran on her birthday and on major holidays. He sent flowers twice, once when she had her knee replaced, once when my grandfather died. My grandfather died 6 years ago. After the funeral, Dominic pulled me aside in the kitchen and said quietly that he hoped Gran was going to be sensible about the estate planning. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. I got back in my car and drove home and didn't think about it again for a long time. About 2 years before Gran passed, she asked me to help her go through some boxes in the spare bedroom. Old financial documents, mostly, tax returns from the 1990s, insurance policies on cars they no longer owned, the usual archaeology of a long life. We worked through it together over a Saturday afternoon, Gran sitting in the armchair directing me on the floor sorting things into piles. At some point, she got quiet, and I looked up, and she was holding a small leather notebook. "I've been keeping track," she said. She showed me. It was a log. Years of entries. Every phone call she'd received, every visit, every dime someone had cancelled, every birthday acknowledged, every one that passed without contact. She had noted when she was sick and who had called to check on her. She had noted when she'd needed help and who had shown up. It was written in her neat, small handwriting, the handwriting of someone who had gone to school when penmanship was still taught as a discipline. "Gran," I said, "how long have you been doing this?" "Since your grandfather got sick," she said. "He told me to. He said, Dot, when the time comes, you're going to need to know who actually loves you." She closed the notebook and put it back in the box. "He was usually right about things like that," she said. I didn't ask any more questions. I helped her finish sorting the boxes, and we had soup for dinner, and she asked me about my job, and we watched an episode of her favorite British baking show before I went home. But I thought about that notebook for a long time afterward. Gran passed on a Tuesday in March. It was her heart, in the end, which is what her cardiologist had told us to expect for the past 3 years. She had done everything right, the medication, the diet, the follow-up appointments, and her heart had simply run its course. She passed in the hospital with me there. I had been there since Sunday. I had called Dominic on Monday to tell him it was close. He said he would try to get a flight. He arrived 4 hours after she passed. He was still in the hospital lobby on the phone with someone when I came down in the elevator. I am not going to say what I thought in that moment. Some things don't need to be said. The weeks after were a blur in the way that weeks after a death always are. There were arrangements to make, people to call, a house full of a lifetime's worth of things to figure out. I handled most of it. My parents helped where they could. They're in their late 60s, and my mother takes things hard, and my father has a bad back. And Dominic flew back to Phoenix after the funeral with the promise that he'd be engaged in whatever needed to happen next. Engaged turned out to mean texting me questions I had already answered and asking when the attorney was going to reach out. The attorney reached out 6 weeks after Gran passed. Her name, as I said, is Ms. Fitch, and her office sent a formal letter requesting the presence of all named parties at a meeting to review and execute the terms of the estate. Dominic booked his flight that same afternoon. He called me that night, cheerful in the way that made the back of my neck prickle, and asked if I knew anything about what the will said. I know Gran had a plan, I said. Sure, he said, but do you know the specifics? We'll find out at the meeting, I said. There was a pause. Brooke, he said, I just want to make sure everyone is treated fairly. I said goodnight and hung up. 2 days before the meeting, my mother called me. She was crying, which is not unusual for my mother in the best of circumstances, but this was different, tighter, more urgent. She told me that Dominic had been talking to them, that he was concerned, that he had done some research and believed Gran might have been, and she used his word here, unduly influenced in her estate planning. By who? I asked. A pause. Well, sweetheart, you were over there a lot. I sat with that for a moment. Mom, I said, I took her to her doctor's appointments. I know, honey. Dominic just thinks. What does Dominic think? Another pause. He thinks the estate should be divided equally, between the two of you. Okay, I said. He's not trying to be difficult, she said. I know, I said. I didn't know anything of the sort. I arrived at the attorney's office 15 minutes early. I got coffee from the cart in the lobby, found the conference room and sat down. Dominic arrived with my sister-in-law. He looked at me with an expression I recognized, calibrated warmth, the look of someone who has decided in advance that he is being reasonable. Hey, sis, he said. Hey, I said. My parents came in together. My mother hugged me. My father sat down and looked at the table. Ms. Fitch came in with 2 associates, set her folders on the table and thanked everyone for coming. She said she would begin by reviewing the structure of the estate and then move on to the specific terms. Dominic's attorney, yes, he had brought one, a man in an expensive suit who set a leather portfolio on the table with a small, deliberate thump, said that they appreciated the opportunity to be present and hoped the process would be straightforward. Miss Fitch looked at him the way someone looks at a word they don't recognize and aren't particularly interested in learning. I'm sure it will be, she said. She opened her folder. Gran's estate was not complicated in the way that the estates of very wealthy people are complicated. She and my grandfather had been comfortable. They owned their home outright. They had retirement savings, they had a modest investment account, and there was a life insurance policy from what felt like another era that turned out to still be active. Total value in round numbers, just under $480,000 plus the house. Miss Fitch explained the structure first. Gran had worked with an estate attorney, not Miss Fitch, an older man who had since retired, to establish a revocable living trust approximately 4 years prior. Upon her death, the trust had become irrevocable. The house and the investment account were held in the trust. The life insurance policy had a named beneficiary. Dominic's attorney leaned forward slightly. Miss Fitch continued. The trust, she explained, distributed assets as follows. The house was to be sold, with the proceeds split 60% to me, 40% to Dominic. The investment account was to be distributed 70% to me, 30% to Dominic. The life insurance policy, Gran had named me as sole beneficiary. My mother made a small sound. Dominic's attorney said, "We'd like to understand the reasoning behind this distribution." Miss Fitch said, "The trust document includes an explanatory letter from the grantor, which I'll read in a moment. First, I want to make sure everyone understands the legal structure." She walked through it. The trust was properly executed. It had been reviewed by the retired attorney and witnessed correctly. Gran had been evaluated by her cardiologist at the time of signing. Miss Fitch produced the letter confirming Gran's cognitive status, and there was no legal question as to her capacity. Dominic's attorney started to say something about undue influence. Miss Fitch looked at him. The grantor, she said, anticipated this concern. She opened a second folder. This is the part I still have trouble talking about without my voice doing something embarrassing. Gran had written a letter, not a long one, 2 pages, in her handwriting, which Miss Fitch read aloud in a voice that was even and professional, and somehow made the words land harder for it. Gran wrote that she loved both of her grandchildren. She wrote that she was proud of the adults they had become. She wrote that she understood that her distribution might seem unequal and that she wanted to explain her thinking, not to cause pain, but because she believed that honesty, even difficult honesty, was a form of respect. She wrote that Brooke had been present, not just physically. She was careful to say that. She wrote that presence is not about geography, it is about showing up, when showing up is inconvenient. She listed, in plain language, specific things, the cardiology appointments, the afternoon she'd had a bad reaction to a new medication and had called me at 11 at night and I had come, the Sundays when I'd shown up with groceries because I knew she wouldn't ask for them, the months after my grandfather died when she had needed someone to just sit with her. She wrote that she had kept a record. She mentioned the notebook. She wrote that she had tried, over the years, to let Dominic know when she needed things. She listed the calls she had made and received. She listed the visits. She was not harsh about it. Gran was constitutionally incapable of harshness, but she was accurate. Then she wrote something that I will probably carry with me for the rest of my life. She wrote, "I am not punishing anyone. I am honoring what was real. The people who love you will show you. Pay attention to who shows up." Miss Fitch finished reading. She set the pages down. The room was very quiet. My mother was crying openly now, not the tight, worried tears from the phone call, but something more complicated, slower. My father was staring at his hands. Dominic was looking at the table. His jaw was set. His attorney was writing something in his portfolio. The attorney cleared his throat. "We want to be respectful of the process," he said, "but our position is that this distribution reflects an undue influence on the part of—" "I need to stop you there," Ms. Fitch said, "because the trust document includes a no-contest clause." Silence. "If any beneficiary initiates legal action to contest the terms of this trust," Ms. Fitch said, "that beneficiary forfeits their entire share of the estate." She let that sit for a moment. "Your client," she said to Dominic's attorney, "is currently named as a beneficiary. I want to make sure he understands the full picture before any decisions are made. Dominic looked at his attorney. His attorney looked at his portfolio. The thing about no contest clauses in Ohio is that they are enforceable. I know this because Gran had explained it to me one afternoon on her back porch about a year before she died. Not because she told me what was in her trust, she didn't. Not the specifics, but because she told me she had taken care of things, and she told me not to worry, and she said in the particular way she had of saying things that sounded casual and weren't. I made sure it would hold, Brooke, even if someone is foolish enough to push. I hadn't asked what she meant. I understood now. Dominic asked for a break. We all stood up. I went to the window and looked out at the street below. It was a gray March afternoon, the same kind of gray as the day Gran died, and the trees along the block were still bare. My mother came and stood beside me. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "I didn't know about the notebook." "I know," I said. "She never said." "No." My mother was quiet. "Then, did you know about the trust?" "I knew she had a plan," I said. "She told me not to worry. I didn't ask for more than that." My mother looked at me for a moment. Something shifted in her face. Not an apology exactly, but something adjacent to one. "She was right about you," my mother said. "She was always right about people." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, and we stood there until Ms. Fitch's assistant called us back in. When we sat back down, Dominic's attorney said they would not be pursuing a contest. He said it in lawyer language, careful and hedged, but that was the substance of it. They would not be filing anything. They were accepting the terms of the trust. Dominic did not look at me. I did not look at him either. This was not a moment I wanted to perform for anyone. Ms. Fitch walked through the next steps. The house would be listed within 60 days. The investment account would be distributed within 30. The life insurance claim was already being processed. I had filed it 3 weeks prior, before any of this, because Gran had told me the policy existed and where to find the documents in a plain white envelope in the second drawer of her desk, labeled in her handwriting, "For Brooke, when the time comes." I had cried for 40 minutes when I found it. The meeting ended without ceremony. Dominic and his attorney left first. My sister-in-law touched my arm on the way out. A small gesture, something I wasn't sure how to read, and said it was good to see me, which under the circumstances was a remarkable thing to say. I told her I hoped the flight back was good. My parents stayed. My father shook Mrs. Mymans, Fitch's hand, and thanked her. My mother hugged me in the hallway, a long one, and said she was sorry she had called me with Dominic's concerns, and that she should have known better, and that Gran would have been— She stopped and started again and said she was so proud of you. "She told me that all the time. I should have told you more." I held on to my mother in that hallway for a while. The house sold 8 weeks later. It went fast. It was priced well, and it was the kind of house that photographs beautifully, with the old trees and the deep yard and the porch. Gran had repainted herself at 77 because she said the color had gone dingy. The closing happened on a Thursday. I sat in another conference room, signed my name on a stack of documents, and when it was over, I drove to the old neighborhood and parked across the street from the house. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there for a while, looking at it. The new owners had already put a small potted plant on the porch. I thought about Gran on that porch in the evenings. The way she held her coffee cup with both hands. The way she laughed, full and sudden, like she was surprised by it every time. I thought about the notebook, about my grandfather telling her to keep it, about the fact that she had spent years writing down every phone call, every visit, every absence, not out of bitterness, but out of something more like clarity, a commitment to seeing people as they actually were, not as she wished they were. I thought about the envelope in the desk drawer. For Brooke. When the time comes, she had known who would find it. I haven't spoken to Dominic since the meeting. I don't know what to say to him, and I think the honest answer is that I'm not sure there is anything useful to say. He is not a villain in my story. He is just a person who made a series of choices over a long period of time that added up to something, and the thing they added up to was a record in a leather notebook written in our grandmother's careful hand. You can argue about fairness all you want. You can talk about geography and careers and the different shapes that lives take. You can make a very reasonable sounding case for why an equal split is the just outcome. But you cannot argue with a log. You cannot guilt trip a trust document. You cannot cry in a conference room and change what the record shows. Gran used to say that love is a verb. She wasn't the first person to say it, I know that, but she meant it more literally than most people do. She meant that love is the thing you do on a Tuesday at 11 at night when someone calls because they're scared. It is the drive across town when you don't feel like it. It is showing up before you're asked and coming back after and not keeping score, but also, quietly, not forgetting. She didn't forget. I carry that with me. The notebook, the letter, the envelope in the drawer. The fact that someone can leave this world and still, through the care they took while they were in it, reach forward and tell you, I saw you, it mattered. You were not invisible. If you have someone in your life who shows up for you, really shows up in the small and inconvenient ways, I hope you tell them. I hope you don't wait until there's a leather notebook and a room full of lawyers to make it real. Gran already knew. She'd written it all down. I've thought a lot about what Dominic actually lost that day in Miss Fitch's conference room. And I don't mean the money, though yes, he lost a significant portion of that too, the moment he walked in with his own attorney and a strategy built on a version of events that the notebook quietly demolished. What he lost was something harder to name and harder to get back. He lost the chance to have been the kind of person Gran wanted to remember differently. That's the part that stays with me. Not the trust, not the no contest clause, not even the letter. It's the fact that Gran had years to watch how people moved through her life, and she paid attention, and she wrote it down. Not to punish anyone. She said that herself, in her own handwriting. She was honoring what was real. And what was real was a long accumulated record of choices, small ones mostly, a call made or not made, a flight booked or not booked, a Tuesday night when someone needed help and either you came or you didn't. I think about that a lot when I'm tempted to let the small things slide. The check-in text I'm tired to send, the visit I keep meaning to make. We tell ourselves that the big gestures will make up for the gaps, that showing up at the funeral counts for the years of distance, that a flower delivery covers the 11 months in between. But people feel the gaps. They feel them in real time, even if they're too gracious to say so. Gran was too gracious to say so. She just wrote it down. What Dominic never understood, what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that integrity isn't a single dramatic act. It's not one good decision under pressure. It's the texture of how you live across years, the pattern that forms when you add up all the small choices no one is watching you make. Gran watched. She always watched, not with suspicion, but with the quiet attentiveness of someone who understood that love has to be demonstrated to be real. I'm not a perfect person. I didn't show up for Gran because I had calculated that it would benefit me someday. I showed up because she was my grandmother, and I loved her, and she needed someone to drive her to her appointments and sit with her when the evenings got long. That's it. There was no strategy, there was just the decision, made over and over again across 4 years, to be present when it was inconvenient, to answer the phone at 11 at night, to bring the groceries she wouldn't ask for. The hard truth that this whole experience taught me is that you can't build a real relationship on the installment plan. making minimum payments of attention and expecting full equity when the account closes. It doesn't work that way. Not with grandparents, not with parents, not with anyone who is paying attention to the difference between what you say and what you actually do. Gran knew the difference. She always had. I keep a dry erase board now. It's on my refrigerator. What are you grateful for today? I change my answer every morning, the way she taught me to without ever making it a lesson. Today it says, I am grateful that she saw me clearly and loved me anyway and made sure I knew it.